If you've been going around the good old internet looking for the right podcast to fulfill your New York Yankees needs, well, I'll be the first to deliver the good news to you. You have found it. Here on Yapping Yankees with me, your host, Mike Scudero, you and I will be discussing the latest news, takes, and talk throughout the entire Yankee universe. Oh, and there may be some ranting on my behalf. Yeah. Anyway, what do you say we get to it? Let's get to yapping! Good afternoon to my fellow Yankee fans, and welcome to episode 45 of the Yapping Yankees podcast, where we yap about the Yanks and nothing but the Yanks. As always, I am your host, Mike Scudero, here on this Sunday, May 3rd, 2020. Now let's get things started by, as always, giving our shout out to the Team Left Jab United Radio Network, as well as Grunt Talks MLB. First up, as always, Team Left Jab. They feature Team Left Jab Boxing Radio, Team Left Jab Uncensored, and of course, the Team Left Jab United Radio Network. Be sure to go follow Team Left Jab on all social media platforms at Team Left Jab and check out their great sports content across anywhere that you find podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Blog Talk Radio, you name it, the list goes on, guys. Be sure to check out Team Left Jab. And our other shout out goes to Grunt Talks MLB. Be sure to visit their website, grunttalksmlb.com, to see all of their baseball content and go to their podcast section to see where they feature Yapping Yankees. Be sure to also follow those behind the website. Darren on Twitter at Yankees Report 28, as well as the baseball chick Samantha at Ziggy89X. Special thanks to Darren and Grunt Talks MLB for joining in on the growth of Yapping Yankees. Well, here we are, guys. May 3rd, episode 45 of Yapping Yankees, as the weeks just continue to fly right by. Today's episode could be shorter than usual for two reasons, or it might not be, we'll see. But if it is, it's for two reasons. One, because there'll be less topics to discuss with news today. We'll be talking briefly about the 2020 Hall of Fame inductions being postponed, the status of umpires in 2020, if baseball is to be played, that is, MLB's refund policy, which I know many people are fired up about refunds for games that obviously are not happening, along with the new 3-division plan, which is definitely the subject we'll spend the longest on, I'd say, today, and Stanton's generous donation, but many of those are quick, so we'll see what happens there. There were also some fake reports, too, throughout the week, like minor league baseball being canceled this year, but Jeff Passan, who I very much trust, said it wasn't true, so you just have to be careful with news sometimes. And the second reason is a personal reason, which will nicely lead into the next part of my introduction today, and that is that today, it is my little brother's 16th birthday. I definitely did not want to get into things today without giving my awesome and crazy brother Thomas a happy birthday shout out on the podcast. He does turn 16 today on May 3rd, so it's awesome that his birthday fell on a Sunday, so it's the actual day of a Yapping Yankees episode. I'd give him a shout out regardless of whether it's on a Sunday or earlier in the week, but it's cool that it's today nonetheless. So Thomas, I love you, and I hope you can still enjoy your birthday today despite everything going on, and I can't wait to celebrate with you later. I love you, kid. I do feel bad for those with birthdays in these times when there's not really much to do to celebrate, but we'll try to make it fun for you nonetheless, Thomas. I love you. And I cannot believe you're 16 years old. I can remember you being born like it was yesterday. Happy birthday, Thomas. As far as the rest of you, I hope you and your loved ones have continued to stay safe. It is a new month, and hopefully it'll bring about new and better times for everyone and the world as a whole with this godforsaken virus. New York has taken a turn for the better recently. I hope the rest of the country follows suit. But just keep distancing, guys. It's not hard to do. I know the weather's beautiful these last couple of days here in New York and maybe in other parts of the country too. And it is good to go out and even see people as long as you keep your distance. Please don't forget that. It's vital in slowing the spread of this freaking thing, and it really is not hard to do. You can go see people. I've even seen my friends, and we've taken a walk around my neighborhood, as I've said, and I've taken a walk with my girlfriend Vic around the neighborhood as well. And whenever we see people that are outside of our house, we just keep our distance. It's not that hard to do. It's really not that hard. Just keep your distance. It's vital in slowing the spread of this thing. And I know it's annoying to wear, but if you can't keep your distance, then put on a mask. Come on, guys. But I will say, one thing's for sure. If these first 2 or 3 days of May are any indication to the type of weather we'll have this month, then I am looking very forward to the rest of this month for sure, because it has been drop-dead gorgeous these last couple of days here in New York. But Anyway, as I said before, we got another good episode planned for you on this lovely Sunday. We've got this week's poll to discuss and the Yankees and Major League Baseball news I told you about earlier that we will yap about today. And again, just as a reminder, we'll be talking about a generous donation that Stanton has made. We'll talk about the status of the 2020 Hall of Fame inductions, the status of umpires for 2020 if baseball is played, Major League Baseball making an announcement on ticket refunding, and the new 3-division proposal. So let's get right into it. We will start with this week's poll as always and head on to Twitter first and then head on to Instagram after that. Before we get into some news, let's get into it. We got quite a bit of replies on the poll on Twitter this week, so I'll try to get through as many as I can before we have to move on to Instagram and then so on and so forth for the show today. So this week's question, and again we're starting on Twitter, is, at this point, are you okay with having the altered schedules with realigned divisions for this year? And of course reply below with your thoughts for your shout out on the podcast as we do every week. And you've heard me ask a lot of poll questions throughout the last few weeks about how you feel at certain points in time about baseball coming back this year at any certain point with these given circumstances. But the reason for the poll this week is because, as you heard prior, and you will hear later when we go more in depth on it, is that this week there was a new proposal with a potential 3-division plan, getting rid of the American League and National Leagues pretty much and having 3 divisions with 10 teams each in them. And there would probably be about 100 regular season games played, so the schedule would be altered and the divisions would be different. So given this plan and hearing about it, and if anybody's minds have changed about the approach to this sort of thing in the last couple of weeks since I asked a question like this, that's really what this question was based around after hearing that new division plan and hearing what you guys think about it. So once more, the question is, at this point, are you okay with having the altered schedules with realigned divisions for this year? So again, basically just asking about the new plan that just surfaced. The 2 choices, very simple, just 2 of them. The first choice was sure, I would definitely be okay with it. And the second choice is nah, just wait until 2021. And of course, that second choice was for the people who have raised their extreme concerns about the health of everybody involved in these games, and of course, the convenience for the athletes and their families, which was in high doubt after a plan like the Arizona plan was announced and people heard that the athletes would be away from their families for about 5 months in complete isolation in Arizona. But there's been discussion of Major League Baseball trying to overcome these hurdles and see how they could get past certain problems like that. And of course, new proposals with new and more promising potential details have been listed since then, and things have definitely changed since that Arizona plan was announced almost a month ago, so things are a bit different now. But of course, I imagine you still have those people out there that are looking out for other people's safety and saying, is it worth it? Maybe we should just wait until next year. So that's what that second choice is mainly for. And of course, the first choice, if you just want baseball at this point and you think they'll be safe doing it and you like this proposal or any one of the past ones, then you go for sure, definitely. And I'll tell you right now, that choice of sure won big time. I think a lot of people just want baseball back, and it's pretty easy to see where they're coming from in these times when there are really no distractions or anything fun to watch or do necessarily that's new or live and entertainment, sports, anything of the sorts. I could really imagine why people just really want baseball back at this point. So again, the choice of sure won big time. It was pretty much a landslide. 73% of the hundreds of you that voted on this poll voted for sure you'd be completely fine with the altered schedules and realigned divisions for 2020, and 27% of you said nah, just wait until 2021. So there are still plenty of people out there that just think it would be better and safer to wait until 2021 when things are a little bit more normal or the way things used to be or as close to the way as things used to be. And of course, if some sort of a vaccine or a drug is to come out for the virus by 2021, it would obviously be safer to return, and it would just be better when things are a little closer to normal or a lot closer to normal, just more of a sense of normalcy from this year, that's for sure. So let's see what's on everybody's minds and their replies. We'll get started with @Laker477, and Laker477 says, I am okay with whatever plan MLB comes up with, as long as it is done with the safety of everyone involved being the top priority. Well, yeah, if you've heard back to past Yapping Yankees episodes, it's basically exactly how I feel. So I agree with that. Safety has to be number one. @Laura_Icemont says, sure, I think it would be fun. We're all desperate for baseball at this rate, so anything would satisfy us as long as we can watch it. Yeah, I would love to watch some baseball on television again. But again, as long as the safety is the top priority once again, then yeah, if baseball's on my television, you best believe I'll be watching it. Even if it's not the baseball that we've seen for so many years or the sport that we're familiar with format-wise or anything of the sort, if it's baseball, I'll watch it at this point. All those changes hopefully will just be for this year because of the extenuating circumstances, and any baseball is baseball to me, so if it's safe, then I'll watch. At Tegan Graham 23 says, mini rant. Houston is literally 350 miles closer to Miami than it is to Los Angeles. So why on God's green earth is it still in the West Division? And why is Atlanta in the Central? The commish has to pick up a map and maybe look at it for once and see what our country looks like. And then Toronto is 235 miles away from Detroit, 291 miles from Cleveland, and 494 from Cincinnati. The closest AL East team is the Yankees at 473 miles away. It's closer to the two Chicago teams than it is to the next closest AL East team, Boston. So how is Toronto not in the Central? Wow, Tegan, you did your research. At least someone knows how to pull out a map and read it. But yeah, Tegan's problem is basically surrounded around the new 3-division plan, which I assume all of you read it by now, and where all the teams would be placed. The 3 divisions, and we'll get into it, would be the East, Central, and West, and each of them would have 10 teams in it, obviously making up the totality of the 30 Major League Baseball teams. But Tegan's right, and I feel like that's a problem throughout all the other sports, especially basketball. I've noticed that there are a lot of teams in divisions where they don't necessarily belong geographically. So I guess in this new 3-alignment plan for baseball, I guess the same sort of problem lies there, as someone like Tegan was kind enough to map out through research. I mean, really, those are really mapped out numbers. Very nicely done, Tegan. At BobbyTats631 says, it took a while to get used to the idea of realigned divisions, but nothing about this year has been normal anyway. For a shortened season, it might make for a more exciting playoff chase. Well, it could. If there's less games, then all of those games definitely have more meaning, and it could make for a more exciting chase. You're absolutely right. At MikeB_923 says, if it's the only way to have baseball in 2020, then count me in. But yeah, another person just wants baseball back. It's understandable, Mike. It's hard to argue with. At Black Rebirth 52, my good friend James Celestin says, at this point, sure, it's only for this season and this season only. And if it gets baseball back, then so be it. I hear you, James. I hear you. A lot of people just want the game back. At T. Sebas Rocks, I hope I pronounced that last name right, Terry. I apologize if I did not, says safety first or else we may lose some of our faves. So let's be patient and hope this COVID-19 leaves for good. Well, yeah, you said it. I mean, it'd be a miracle and it'd be a fantastic thing if this virus goes away as soon as it came. We just have to keep our fingers crossed. At EdNYC73 says, I think as long as we get baseball, it will be great. Yeah, I think ratings would be through the roof. I think that's for sure. People would just be so thrilled to have it back at any capacity. I think these replies so far have said that. At WesReyes15_ says, I want baseball, but I'd rather have a complete season instead of a shortened one. So, of course, Wes seems to be saying that maybe we should just wait until next year. And you know what? That is the thought process with some people. They just rather wait for some sense of normalcy to return and wait until next year when things could be like we're used to seeing. So I can't really argue with that either, but I do definitely understand the people that just want baseball back too. I get both sides. I truly do. At Book Washington says, little baseball is better than no baseball. I'm all for it. Fair enough. At Gangreen875 says, I'd take the Yanks playing wiffle ball against the Jets at this point. All right, fair enough. I definitely understand that one. Well, you know something? Wiffle ball is actually pretty fun. Not gonna lie to you. At NCostanzo24 says, anyone saying no isn't a real baseball fan. Any baseball is better than no baseball. Well, I'll say this right now. I'm not really one to go on social media or come on this show and call anyone a real or fake fan because everybody knows deep down how real or fake of a fan they are or how casual they are regardless. And whatever people are, it's fine. They know deep down what they are as far as how big their fandom is. But there are people out there with legitimate concerns about the players' health or the inconvenience to the athletes and their families like it was outlined in the Arizona plan. Like, people have their concerns about this. So I wouldn't say the people who have their concerns about this are fake fans just because they don't want to see baseball because they think that there are more important things in life and that the athletes need to be assured that they will be healthy and that they need to take care of their families in these times. I can't really blame people for thinking like that, and I'm not going to call them fake fans over it, but I get it. People are passionate, and they want baseball back. A lot of people are just on edge nowadays, and they really just want some sense of normalcy in this life to return, and they just want their sports back or any form of entertainment to distract them from this mess in the world right now. I understand the passion over this. I do. I'm just really not one to go out there and deem someone a real or fake fan based on their lack of concern or extreme concern over some of these plans and the risk that comes with them. I'm really not one to do that. Then we had my lovely girlfriend at Vic Salimo says, psht, easy win for the Yanks. But in all seriousness, I think it could be fun, and we need a little fun during these dark times. Plus, I worry about the guys getting rusty if they don't play, so I'm all for it. Yeah, and those were definitely some other concerns that others had, saying if they go the entire calendar year without playing, then in 2021 the product on the field might suffer because these guys haven't seen live pitching or anything of the sorts for months and months. So I definitely get that view of saying the guys have to play some sort of baseball at any capacity, even if it is not the baseball that we're used to seeing, but I definitely get your point. You don't want anybody getting rusty either, and again, safety is number one, and we could definitely use some fun during these dark times, absolutely. And by saying it's going to be an easy win for the Yanks, I assume you mean by seeing the standings and seeing what the East Division would look like, and yeah, I'll foreshadow it a little bit before we get into in-depth details later, but I will tell you right now, it would be a pretty easy division victory for the Yankees. We'll get into all the details later. At 7, Brooklyn Romano says, look, I miss baseball as much as the next guy, but I'm not excited about 7-inning doubleheaders or the idea of a 69-game season, and Lord knows how many teams make the playoffs. Games with no fans, neutral sites, and it also bothers me that the Yanks were loaded and now anything can happen. Well, yeah, I definitely understand that viewpoint of how ready the Yankees were to go in 2020 and how hyped everybody was to see this stacked team get into the regular season. But there is the benefit for those who they have that are injured, like Judge, Stanton, Paxton, Hicks. They have more time to recover. There's a benefit right there. But I do understand that people were very, very excited nonetheless to see this stacked Yankees team who were ready to go to start the year and see what they had in store, and they would just love to have baseball on right now. I totally understand that. And yeah, basically anything can happen. Anything's in the cards right now. A lot of different proposals, and quite frankly, every day brings about something new, so you just never know. But I'm not so sure about those 7-inning doubleheaders anymore. I have not heard those mentioned very much since they were first brought up in the Arizona plan. I know that was the primary plan those were mentioned in, but a lot of things have changed since then. You know, they were also talking about electronic strike zones in that plan, yet there was news, and we'll get into it later, about umpires actually being a part of 2020 if baseball is to be played, so the electronic strike zone thing seems to be out of the question if umpires are going to be used this year. And to the best of my knowledge, those 7-inning doubleheaders were just in a real big effort to get as many games in as possible, but if they're going to have about a 100-game schedule, I think they could notch that in without having to do too many doubleheaders, and especially without having to chop any innings off of those doubleheaders, I would hope. So again, my recommendation, as I've recommended so many times in these last few weeks, is just to stay patient. The truth is right now nothing is for certain, and there's no definitive timetable on anything either, so we'll see what happens, and see if any part of those proposals or just a single proposal in itself is used, or if none of them are used and a future proposal that we have not heard yet is used. We'll have to see. Up next, we had at Jim_Bornholt says, Major League Baseball is being dodgy when it comes to explaining the conditions under which play can resume safely. I'm not holding my breath expecting baseball anytime soon. Well, I understand that, because nothing is for certain, and they've all just been suggestions thrown out there as we expect. That's what proposals are, but we'll see which one ends up being used, whether it's one we've heard already, or if it's little pieces of each one, or if it's one we haven't heard yet. I mean, we just have to see. I hate giving that answer all the time, but that's really the only answer. There's nothing for certain yet, and a lot of it is just the waiting game. Then we had at MountainGal456, my good friend Tina, one of my best listeners and supporters out there, and she had to say, I would usually say nah, but what the heck? We're all getting desperate for baseball. I guess it would certainly be different and could very well be a lot of fun. It could be. I mean, we haven't seen it played yet, so anything can happen, but it could be fun. These are crazy times, and this has been a crazy year, so that warrants for some crazy outcomes and possibilities. Then we had at Peace Now for Life says, my opinion hasn't really changed. The decision must be made with nothing but safety in mind. If it's safe, then yeah, I would say play any way possible. But it won't be considered a real season or championship at this point. I completely agree. And if you've been listening every week in the last few weeks of Yapping Yankees, you know that is my exact opinion. I've said it many, many times. I do think that safety should be number one. And if the season is played, I think just too many things would be changed at this point. Even if it does end up being fun, I don't doubt that it could be a fun thing. But the season would be too altered and different with too many extenuating circumstances to the point where I do think that it would just be better off if this season were just an exhibition season and you have the guys out there playing baseball for everybody's entertainment. And so, like my girlfriend said before, they don't get rusty and you don't have a crappy product on the field for 2021. So that, Rebecca, that is my exact opinion on it. And anyone who's been listening the last few weeks since all this crap started knows that is exactly what I've been saying. I don't see any harm in this season being an exhibition season. Things are so freaking crazy and different. There's no harm in having an exhibition season. And yes, as we've been saying ad nauseum, safety is number one. Then we had at Pastor Mike GHCC says, I voted no just because I don't see how you can have any kind of championship series that would have any legitimacy. It would always be tainted by the short season. Plus, do you want our best players chancing injury for a season that's the equivalent of a Parks and Rec league? Interesting description, Parks and Rec. But yeah, that's another concern that somebody could have. The fact that players could be getting unnecessary injuries with games that a lot of people may not even consider to be legitimate. And that's why I think it would just be better to hold it as an exhibition season, as I've been saying. I don't think there's any harm in that. But I get the injuries concern, especially us Yankee fans who know injuries and watching our players go through them like it's an everyday routine. So I understand that. At Marcia Nicholas says, bring me baseball, please. I think I can go with some one-time season arrangements. Well, yeah, again, as long as it's just this year, and I've mentioned that too, just for this year, because obviously things have been so crazy, and everything's been turned so upside down, so you obviously expect some upside down outcomes. So just for this year, because of this crazy year, yes, just the one-time season changes, please. At NY Sports Fan 2015 says, sure, anything is better than having no baseball at all. Well, a lot of people share that opinion. At Joe GNJ1 says, if they do align divisions this year only, DH and DH only. All right, Joe. At I'm_BleachBit says, absolutely. I love baseball, I want baseball, and I crave baseball. Well, I think that's all that needs to be said about that. Very respectable answer. At WhoDat says, God, some of these ats. They said, yes, it's a no-brainer. Sure, it would be odd, different, but whatever. If you're voting no, you're saying you'd rather not watch Aaron Judge or Mike Trout play baseball this summer. Come on. And just for the chance to boo the cheaters from Houston. Well, without fans, if the rest of this year is to play out without any fans at all, you're not going to hear much booing because there's not going to be a crowd. Yeah, the thought of not seeing those guys and the thought of not having baseball overall is, of course, painful. No one's arguing that. At official52011 says, I'm okay as long as it's safe. Well, you know I agree with that. At TJT Whitting here says, if anything, it would be an interesting year. And yeah, a couple of other people have said this too. You know, it could be fun, and it could be. It would definitely be interesting. It'd be something we haven't seen before. I think that much is obvious at this point. At John YCQ says, I wouldn't mind trying different things like this every season. Well, I'm not sure I'd want those radical changes every year, and I'm not even sure how it'd be possible to change these big things every year, but okay. I get why that would be a fascinating thought to some, but I just don't really know how you'd even go about doing that. At Udi Jimmy says, I'm for anything that gets the season started. Well, so are a lot of other people, Jimmy. That's definitely understandable. At Jennifer NYC says, I'm okay with altered schedule. I'm not okay with realigned divisions. I would be happy to watch the World Series on Thanksgiving Day. And yeah, another stipulation for a lot of these proposals, of course, as you've heard, and you'll hear about this later, and I'll mention it now too, but of course all of these proposals will likely have the postseason run until late November, possibly even very early December. So just imagine, and I've spoken about how cool this would be on the podcast already, but just imagine how wild it would be if on Thanksgiving you turn on your TV and there's baseball. It'd be wild. It'd be awesome to a degree, but it would be definitely something new because we're all used to baseball ending in late October or the first couple of days of November. That would be freaking wild. And we'll finish off the Twitter replies today with @mommy_Yankee1976 says, I need to see our boys in whatever capacity. So again, another person they want the boys back. They want baseball back. It is more than understandable. And with that being said, as for Twitter, that's all for today with the replies. I'm sorry if I didn't get to you, but just be sure to interact with next week's poll, and I'll do my best to get to you then. But let's head on over to Instagram before we wrap up this week's poll segment. Of course, the same question applies, guys. At this point, are you okay with having the altered schedules with realigned divisions for this year? And just like on Twitter, it seems like people just want their baseball back because 88% of people who voted on Instagram said sure, they would be totally fine with the altered schedules and realigned divisions, and only 12% of people said nah, I'll wait until 2021. So a lot of people just want their baseball back. I think that much is obvious. Let's get on to a couple of replies from Instagram before we move on to news today. At official52011, again getting another shout out on Instagram after already replying on Twitter, says as long as it's safe and there's more testing. Yeah, definitely a big component. I'm glad you mentioned that, more testing. And we have heard recently that there is a lot more testing available here in the United States, so hopefully if they do have to regularly test the athletes and everybody else involved that would be going to the ballparks if baseball were to be played, then hopefully they could do that without having to take away any tests from the communities or regular people in society. That would be a good thing. So definitely a good point. Testing is definitely key. The testing was a big concern early on. At Matt O'Leary NY, my good friend Matt, who I consider to be like a brother to me, be sure to go follow Matt on all social medias at Matt O'Leary NY. You want to check out his great content. And Matt says that the East Division would be so fun. And yeah, I think it would be pretty entertaining. I mean, definitely different, and there are a lot of teams in the East that would be in a completely other division from the Yankees or the Mets, but you'll see just how fun it could be when I read out the names to you later of the teams that are in each division, where they are. Very interesting for sure, and it could definitely be fun. As I said before, it's something we haven't seen before. It could be very fun and new and experimental after this crazy year we've had. It could be a good time. And lastly, we have my mother, Julia Gina Scudero, and considering she always has electrifying replies, I definitely think that this is a good one to finish off with here on Instagram, and my mom had to say, why not? It'll be interesting. Plus, guess what? We'll have baseball. Come on, everyone. We've learned to adjust to so much because of this nightmare we're living in, so why not say yes to baseball? Bring it on! Mom, I love that enthusiasm, and I think a lot of people share in it. I do. Good positive comment to end on, and that is all for this week's replies for the poll on Twitter and Instagram now. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to join in on the fun with this week's Yapping Yankees poll. I greatly appreciate all the interaction, guys. You know that. And now that the poll is done, let's get into some news. This week, we'll start with the Yankees news since there's really only one thing that happened in Yankees news this past week. And then we'll move on to MLB news, and that'll be that for today's episode. And in today's Yankees news, there's yet another really feel-good donation story, and this time it features Giancarlo Stanton. You've heard other donation stories for the Yankees in the likes of the Yankees organization itself, and other people like Garrett and his wife, Amy Cole, and now it's Giancarlo Stanton. And it's a big donation. He donated 15,000 face shields to New York and California hospitals. Now, there was an article a few days ago that came out in the middle of the week by Timothy Rapp on Bleacher Report, and Stanton is in fact making these donations to Southern California and New York, especially Southern California, which, as we know, California is where Stanton grew up, and that is where the masks designated for California are going around his growing up area. Some of the places they'll be going to are Inglewood Centinela Hospital Medical Center, Van Nuys Valley Presbyterian Hospital, and the East Los Angeles Doctors Hospital. And Stanton himself had to say that the African American and Latino communities are hit the hardest. Those hospitals have the least resources and they were depleted. Stanton also said that he plans to donate more beyond the initial shipment of face shields, and that they're going out just as fast as they can be made. He will also routinely continue to check on where they're needed most, and likely continue to make more donations accordingly. So I'll just say this much when it comes to this story. I know a lot of people are not the biggest fans of Giancarlo Stanton because they feel he hasn't lived up to his contract, or they think that he's just not as good as he was talked up to be throughout the years. Whatever the reason is, there is no excuse for bringing that into this subject, because Giancarlo Stanton is selflessly doing this, and it's a very, very caring and selfless act of him to do so. I could hear the people right now in the back of my head saying, oh, he's got the money, why shouldn't he do it? It should be an automatic thing. No, it really shouldn't be. Nobody can be told how to spend their money, and they can't be forced to spend their money one way or the other. And there are plenty of people just sitting there not doing much with their money that they could easily use to help other people, but Stanton's not doing that. He's going out there and making these selfless donations to those who need help. And I will always appreciate when somebody does that. I personally don't have any problems with Stanton, but even if I did, I would not bring those problems into this subject. I would still give him credit for doing this, because it really is a very selfless and kind act that he's doing. Nobody can be told how to spend their money from any outsider. And Stanton is choosing to do good with his money, and whether people like it or not, that's very respectable. So good on Stanton for doing this and being yet another person that's really helping the community out as best as he can. People need these things, especially these places that he himself said don't have the resources to properly combat this virus. So I love this, and I'm glad Stanton did this, and I'm always glad when any other player shows their selflessness and does something like this. So good on you, Stanton. All right, with that being said, since that was all for Yankees news, let's move right on to MLB news before we wrap up episode 45 of Yapping Yankees. Couple of quick stories and then a bit of a longer one. The longer one, as I mentioned earlier, being the 3-division plan, but let's get these first 3 MLB news stories out there and let's talk about them. The first story, and this was to be expected, unfortunately, because of everything that's been postponed of late because of the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, but the first piece of news is the fact that the 2020 Hall of Fame induction ceremony was postponed to next year, 2021. And yeah, this is sad news, but I think a lot of us saw this coming. It really is a tough break for those in Cooperstown and the Hall of Fame overall, but this has happened in a lot of areas, not only throughout sports, but throughout all of life, really. Things are just getting postponed, events are getting pushed back, or even canceled. And unfortunately, it seems that Derek Jeter, Larry Walker, and everybody else that was in the 2020 Hall of Fame class to be inducted this summer is going to have to wait until next year. So I guess they're probably going to run the ceremonies at the same time next summer for both the 2020 inductees as well as the 2021 inductees, considering this was just pushed off to next year in 2021. And it sucks, yeah, it really does. But again, a lot of people saw this coming and almost nobody was surprised by this move. Not even the likes of Jeter or Larry Walker, who both agree with it, and they do think that safety should prevail in this, and that it's fine that the ceremony gets pushed back to next year, and I share in that opinion. You know, the Hall of Fame inductions are a very special time for the players, the fans, the sport, and obviously my favorite baseball player of all time, Derek Jeter, was in this class. You don't think I wanted to see him inducted this year? Of course I did. But again, as I said, I did expect this sort of a move to happen. It seemed like everybody else really did too. It really, really sucks, but I get why they did it. Safety should prevail, and they'll get their chance to celebrate their inductions next year. So that was some sad news that came out from Major League Baseball earlier in the week, and that is that the 2020 Hall of Fame induction ceremony has been officially moved to 2021. And again, I think it could work. You know, you do the 2020 inductions first that day, and then the 2021 inductions maybe the next day or later on that day. It would certainly prolong things, but listen, that's what has to happen. These times have changed a lot of things in the world, and we're going to have to adjust accordingly, and so will the Hall of Fame inductions. But as we know, not to worry, our inductees will still be going into the Hall of Fame. It's just a matter of when. And God willing, it should be next year in 2021. Also in MLB news, a few days ago, it came out that Major League Baseball did agree to terms with umpires for 2020 if and when baseball's to be played. And obviously, we do know that we heard from Commissioner Rob Manfred that he fully anticipates baseball to be played this year, which is awesome news, as well as a very positive aspiration to have. So if baseball is to be played, the umpires will have a role in it. Now, this does go back to a reply I had back in the poll when someone was talking about the fact that they would want nothing to do with the 7-inning doubleheader proposal. And I said, hey, since we haven't heard much about that lately, and the fact that other aspects of that Arizona plan where the 7-inning doubleheaders proposal was mentioned have changed, then that shows just how uncertain things are right now. So my point is, don't take too many details to heart, and this was one of them, because in the Arizona plan, you may recall that the possibility of electronic strike zones, for instance, was mentioned, but if there will in fact be umpires, including a home plate one, there goes that detail in that proposal, because you'll have a home plate umpire, there won't be an electronic strike zone. So again, a lot of this is just a part of the waiting game. Nothing is certain, so you have to remember that. But I did think it important to mention today that throughout this past week, Major League Baseball did in fact agree to terms with umpires if baseball is to be played in 2020. And our final story before we move on to our big 3-division plan discussion before ending today is the MLB ticket refunding policy. Now, I know a lot of people were fired up about this. There are a lot of people out there that paid to go to games a while back that booked their plans to go to certain games that should have happened already within the last month and a half or so. As we know, the Major League Baseball season should have started back on March 26th. And when people weren't getting their refunds for these indefinitely postponed games, people started to get ticked off with their individual teams' organizations for not giving them their money back. And they also got ticked off with Major League Baseball as a whole. Some even filed lawsuits. So, of course, especially when it comes to lawsuits and money, the league had to take action, and they came up with their own policy when it came to refunds. There was an article that came out on Bleacher Report on April 28th, towards the beginning of this past week by Megan Armstrong, titled MLB Reportedly Changes Ticket Policy for Games Affected by COVID-19 Amid Lawsuit, and it maps out the league's plan in dealing with this dilemma. And in the article, it says Major League Baseball will allow all 30 clubs to individually decide on a ticket policy during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which will go against the league's usual policy preventing refunds. And Bill Shaken, who's a columnist for the Los Angeles Times, went a little bit more in-depth on it. He said, quote, on a conference call, Major League Baseball informed team officials that they no longer needed to advise fans to hold on to those tickets. The decision clears the way for teams to announce refund policies for the games. The change comes 1 week after MLB and all 30 of its teams were named as defendants in a lawsuit over the failure to refund tickets. StubHub, the league's official resale partner, and 3 other ticket outfits also were named as defendants, end quote. So it's obvious there were a lot of people that were getting ticked off over this. They even went to so much as a lawsuit, and of course, the league had to step in there and come up with some sort of a refund policy. And I saw my fair share of a lot of fans being ticked off over not getting refunded for the tickets they spent their money on. There was a time where people on Twitter were going ballistic over it. There were a couple of days where it was all that I saw on my timeline, just people talking about how they should get refunded for the money they spent for the tickets. Because obviously they felt, hey, I spent money to get tickets on a game that's not even happening right now. I deserve my money back. And of course, it makes it more complicated that the reason for this happening is, of course, out of anybody's control. It's no one's fault here in America. So it's complicated, but those people do deserve their money back because it's out of their control. They spent their money ahead of time on tickets to a game they were certain was going to happen. Nobody foresaw this sort of a thing happening in the world. So when the games were indefinitely postponed and baseball and the rest of the sports world as well as the world as a whole were put on hold, they got ticked off that they weren't getting their money back. And some people went through the law and filed a lawsuit. So hopefully the individual clubs can do right by the fans and return their money to them because they spent money on tickets for games that have never happened yet. And I do hope that they just do right by the fans, and I'm glad that Major League Baseball finally stepped in and said something about it because it was a really big problem. So hopefully people that didn't get their money back have indeed gotten it back since then, and if they haven't, I hope they do at some point because it's only right. Same goes for people who had a trip planned to go on vacation somewhere or anything like that that had to be put on hold or canceled. They deserve their money back. It's not their fault that this all happened, and they spent that money obviously not foreseeing this kind of health crisis happening and putting the world on hold the way it has been put on hold. Who here could have foreseen that? Nobody. So I do hope they do right by the fans. I really, really do. But that was Major League Baseball's response to the ticket refunding dilemma and lawsuits. And last but certainly not least today, guys, let's talk a bit about yet another proposal that has been thrown at us for baseball to potentially be played in 2020, the new 3-division plan. It came out earlier in the week, of course, and it spiked some people's interest and some people really didn't care for it, but I think this proposal got more interest than most of the others that have come out so far. We did hear a good amount of people in the poll, and there are a good amount of people all throughout social media that think it could be fun. So why don't you sit back and let me tell you a little bit about it if you didn't read up on all the details about it yet. So the 3-division plan, I'll give you the details about it in a Bleacher Report article that came out on April 28th, way earlier in the week as well, from Joseph Zucker, titled, MLB could realign into 3 divisions if 2020 season restarts after hiatus. So we'll read a bit of the article outlining a lot of the details of this new proposal. So USA Today's Bob Nightingale, who you may remember also released the plan about a week and a half or two ago to split Major League Baseball up into the Grapefruit and Cactus Leagues, which are typically the 2 leagues used for spring training, and to use Florida and Arizona as playing locations. That was one of the multiple proposals we have heard up to this point. And now Nightingale is mentioning this new 3-division plan. And here on Yapping Yankees, I definitely think it important to discuss every proposal coming across the table so far because we never know which one will be used, or if there will be little bits and pieces of every single proposal that we've heard so far that could be used once baseball starts up. So again, Bob Nightingale earlier in the week on Tuesday did report that Major League Baseball is considering this strategy in which the season would begin in late June or early July and feature at least 100 games. Teams would be grouped together geographically in 3 10-team divisions, scrapping the American League and National League for this season. The realignment represents a significant departure from what had become the most discussed idea to bring baseball back. Nightingale noted MLB's three-division plan is contingent on getting the green light from medical professionals and that widespread coronavirus testing will need to be available to the public. So let's talk about this a little bit before we end today. And as I've done with every single proposal we've heard so far up to this point, I will give the disclaimer, as all the articles up to this point with these proposals have had, that people should remember these are just proposals. They're potential plans that may or may not be used when and if baseball starts back up this year. So my advice, again, as I said earlier in the show and in past recent episodes of Yapping Yankees, is to not take anything to heart or be overly optimistic about anything in these proposals. Because again, they are just that, proposals. Don't go crazy. It's not worth it. But with that being said, it's also important to put this fact alongside this three-division plan proposal, that because some states are starting to ease up on their stay-at-home orders and reopening some businesses, the door is open in some states to possibly play in some of the regular ballparks around the country, just without fans. This was even spoken about being a possibility in New York for Yankee Stadium and Citi Field in the last week or two. These possibilities were thrown around by people like Andrew Cuomo, who, for those of you who don't know, is the governor of New York. And also other states like Michigan and California were mentioned. So we're now seeing the possibility of even bringing more states into it after originally just having Arizona, and then Arizona and Florida, and then Arizona, Florida, and Texas, and then now alongside plans like this three-division plan, the possibility of even more states. So again, another reason why we shouldn't take these proposals too much to heart because again, nothing is certain as of now. But again, about this plan, the hope is to get some sort of a season started by around late June or early July, perhaps get spring training going in the coming weeks by the end of this month, who knows, the end of May. But again, a lot of it is still the waiting game, unfortunately. As time passes, we'll get closer and closer to definite answers, as it has been like the last few weeks when more and more proposals have come to the forefront, and hopefully the situation with this virus continues to take a turn for the better. But right now, the plan seems to be to start a season around late June, squeeze about 100 games in or more, and then have the playoffs into November, probably towards the end of the month, maybe even creeping into the beginning of December. Again, we've heard rumblings about timetables like this for a bit if you listen back to past episodes of Yapping Yankees, but this seems to be the most likely approach to it now. And I do want to read out to you right now which teams will be in which divisions in this new potential three-division plan. It's really interesting. So again, as I said earlier, you're going to have three divisions: the East, the Central, and the West. And as Tegan said in the poll replies, of course, there are a couple of these teams inevitably, because this just seems to be a problem in sports overall at times, that seem to be out of their geographical location. But nonetheless, it's still interesting. So first up, we have the East, and in the Eastern Division would be the New York Yankees and the New York Mets, the Red Sox, the Nationals, the Orioles, the Phillies, the Pirates, the Blue Jays, the Tampa Bay Rays, and the Miami Marlins. Now, I assume this is why a lot of people like my girlfriend were saying, oh, that'd be an easy win for the Yankees. And I kind of find it tough to disagree with that. But that is the Eastern Division. Over in the Central, you'd have the Cubs and the White Sox, the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Royals, the Reds, Indians, Twins, Braves, and Tigers. That's your Central Division. And over in the West, we would have the Dodgers and the Angels, the Giants and the A's, the Padres, the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, the Rangers, the Astros, and the Seattle Mariners. And again, we could point out the couple of geographical issues with that alignment, but nonetheless, this would be very interesting, just for this year. Again, crazy times call for some crazy outcomes and possibilities. And as many have said, and I agree with them, this could be interesting and potentially fun. But we still don't know which proposal they're going to go with, but we've had a few potential proposals from the league, as I mentioned, that we've gone over on this show, as you know. Again, if you want to hear the prior proposals again, listen back to the episodes from the past few weeks of Yapping Yankees. All of it is there. But we've gone over them, and it remains to be seen which one they'll go with for sure. But the league, of course, is discussing it. Many factors need to be discussed, and obstacles need to be overcome before any approach is to be fully pursued. But we shall see what happens. And again, like everybody else said with the poll, I am all for baseball returning so long as it is convenient for the athletes and their families, that the health of the athletes and everyone else involved is assured, and that they could have all the tests necessary to ensure the safety of all of those involved without taking tests away from the regular community and the regular citizens in society. Safety is number one, and if they can nail all of this down, then I, like all the other people who said they'd love for baseball to come back, would love for baseball to return this year. I would be all for it. I would love to turn on my television and see baseball once again. And they damn well seem sure we're getting some form of baseball this year, so we'll see. And just as a reminder, this is the next, I'd say, major proposal after the previous major ones we spoke about. Again, listen back to the past recent episodes of Yapping Yankees to hear more in-depth details about the other major ones. But this is now another one that has been proposed next to the Arizona plan, the Grapefruit Cactus League plan that would happen in Arizona and Florida, the 3-state plan involving Arizona, Florida, and Texas, and now this, the 3-division plan. Could it be one of these 4 that they go with? Little details taken from all of them, a complete other proposal we haven't heard yet. Time will tell, my friends. But as for now, that is all for episode 45 of Yapping Yankees. One last shout out to Team Left Jab and Grunt Talks MLB. Team Left Jab features Team Left Jab Boxing Radio, Team Left Jab Uncensored, and of course the Team Left Jab United Radio Network. Be sure to go follow Team Left Jab on all social media platforms at Team Left Jab and check out their great sports content across anywhere that you find podcasts. Apple, Spotify, iHeart, you name it, the list goes on, guys. Be sure to check out Team Left Jab. And our other shout out goes to Grunt Talks MLB. Be sure to visit their website, grunttalksmlb.com, to see all of their baseball content, and go to the podcast section to see where they feature Yapping Yankees. Be sure to also follow those behind the website. Darren on Twitter at Yankees Report 28, as well as the baseball chick Samantha at Ziggy89X. Special thanks to Darren and Grunt Talks MLB for joining in on the growth of Yapping Yankees. And also, as we've been doing the last few weeks, one last shout out to all of those fighting this virus, COVID-19, on the front lines, selflessly, bravely, and tirelessly doing all they can to rid us of this virus. Doctors, nurses, first responders, police officers, the fire department, all healthcare workers, and so on. I want to extend my gratitude to all of you for your efforts at all times, but especially in these times. Thank you all. Don't forget to follow me on all social medias as well. You can find me on Facebook at Mike Scudero NY. You can easily find me on Twitter because it is the app that I am most disgustingly active on, at Mike Scudero, and you could also find me on Instagram at MikeScuds97. And also be sure to check out the Yapping Yankees YouTube channel. I also don't want to forget to tip my cap, as I do every week, to you, the listener. Whether you just listen, give feedback on the show, vote or reply on the polls, interact with me personally about the Yankees, support me in the podcast, and show love on social media, whatever it is in the whole wide world that you do to show your love and support, I tip my cap to you and remind you just how much I appreciate your believing in me every single day. Thank you very, very much. I hope you SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify listeners enjoyed as always, as well as you YouTubers out there. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on the Yapping Yankees YouTube channel, and listen to the past Yapping Yankees episodes. Episodes 34 up to this one, episode 45, are available on YouTube, and episodes 33 all the way back to episode 1 are also available on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Once again, thank you 3000 for listening. I am Mike Scudero, and I will talk to you next Sunday, May 10th, when I come at you with episode 46 of Yapping Yankees. Until then, hang in there, be safe, be patient, look out for your loved ones, social distance, and don't be an idiot, guys, especially in these times. Come on, I believe in you. Have a good week, guys, and I'll talk to you next Sunday. Take care.